Welcome to the Edgevana Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Thiele, and joining me today is Isaac Sacolick, multi-book published author, global speaker, CIO, and evangelist, and just otherwise amazing guy and great Twitter conversationalist and all-around knowledgeable digital dude. So, Isaac, really appreciate you joining the podcast.
Thanks for that great intro, and I'm going to have to figure out how to use digital dude somewhere. I love it.
Awesome. No copyright rules or anything.
Super.
So Isaac, tell the audience a little bit about yourself, what you're doing these days, and so on.
Well, I tell people that I've sat in the seat of being a CTO in startups. I did that for about a decade. I then became a CIO in organizations that were early on transformation. I started doing that in 2007. I did a number of CIO roles, and along my journey, I started writing and speaking. When my first book, Driving Digital, came out, I pivoted my career. I opened a company called Star CIO, and I continue to write and speak. I publish about 100 articles a year on my blog, which is blogs.starcio.com. I also write for InfoWorld. I speak at about 50 events a year, and my second book is coming out in a few weeks called Digital Trailblazer.
That's awesome. And it's been a pleasure on at least on my side, the conversations we've had over the years on Twitter, and it's a shame that it's taken us this long to actually get together in any kind of something that even approaches a formal conversation. So I'm excited.
We've tried. We got COVID in the way of things.
I know, it's true. There were a couple of times at the CIO event and others that things just didn't work out, unfortunately. But I'm happy that you're here now. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And if you don't mind, I know it's not technically out yet, but I'd love to talk a little bit about your recent book. There were some ideas that I took out of it that I'd love to start with, but tell me, just in your own words, what you're hoping at the highest level, what you're hoping an organization or an individual that is a digital trailblazer can accomplish, right? What does that enable for them?
Mark, every organization has been somewhere in its digital transformation journey. Some are, just getting started. Others have been doing it for 5 years. And what you quickly realize is that, just setting a strategy and getting the leadership on board with an investment, a change of working, a new way of looking at customers and markets, improving customer experiences, becoming more data-driven, moving to the cloud, using emerging technologies. That's all part of it. But you need a leadership level that's ready to run the initiatives that are part of these programs. And, coming off my first book, I will tell you the groups that and people that were most respondent were, heads of IT operations. There were heads of application development, DevOps people, product managers, and data scientists. And they said, look, we get to see one lens of this, one small glimpse of what transformation is all about. We learn our skills. We know our areas, but we're trying to get better at how to run holistic transformation programs outside of our core competencies. I had already started writing my stories down and trying to figure out what the book would look like. And so when COVID hit, I started really cramming my writing down, putting more stories together. And I realized that you can't really learn transformation. You can't really learn leadership just by reading a textbook or participating in a course. Even my workshops that I do in them, they're going to give you a certain glimpse into this. CIOs, CTOs, chief digital officers, you can't wait 5 to 15 years for your teams to be ready to run transformation programs. And so what the book does is it presents my stories in firsthand narrative. So you're right there and then in my first board meeting in a blow up moment when I'm talking about launching a new product and trying to resolve data issues and firefighting through an IT operational and security issue. And I do that through 10 chapters, talking about transformation, talking about creating diverse groups. And at the end of every chapter, I leave 5 lessons learned. So there's 50 lessons learned in the book for anybody who's really trying to get their hands and wrap around what it means to lead a transformation program. And so that's the goal. The goal is to just educate more people, get more people accomplished with it. I think every organization has to have competencies in digital data and technology. We're not just talking about the big 5 technology companies anymore. I've been doing that my whole career, just helping more people and more organizations develop their competencies in these areas.
Right. That's fantastic. And the concept of digital transformation has been around for a while, but it certainly has picked up significant urgency in the last 5 years. And you probably saw while you were accelerating the writing of your book during COVID, that COVID also had a significant impact on people doing things that, not just digital transformation, but also things that are related to, automating or, improving process and to some degree, as horrible as it sounds, removing the dependence on humans as much as possible for certain process, because for many, human availability was a big part of the problem during especially the early days of COVID. Mm-hmm. What kind of advice, at the highest level would you provide a CEO or a CIO who's nervous about whether their digital activities are a transformation or are just point and select activities of digitization?
Yeah, it's a great question. Let me unpack a couple things there. First is, we had to invest in a lot of technical capabilities through the COVID couple years and a little bit now after it. And most of that I would label more of crisis management more than digital transformation. When you have people shifting from remote, from in-person to remote, now to hybrid, and the technologies are different. How you're working on a day-to-day basis is different. Your collaboration's different. Things like, tapping people on the shoulder or having 60 people in a room to come together and align on a direction, or, emails and spreadsheets between people to cement a process. These are the things that didn't work. Having thousands of people connect into a single server in your data center to be able to access something, that probably didn't work. Yeah. And so you saw a combination of IT and HR and a lot of leaders coming together and saying, look, we need to help our employees through these issues of COVID, but we also have to keep our business running. That's crisis management. But what it's done is it's awakened the idea that organizations can do things differently, right? That digital technologies can accomplish things that you perhaps couldn't do as easily without these technologies, and you probably couldn't transform people's behaviors and their acceptance of using new tools as easily before COVID as you did after COVID. So now, my first advice for CEOs is don't take off the gas pedal, right? We're still in a situation where we're in very competitive landscapes. Regardless of industry, there's more competition for customers. There's more supply chain issues that we're all competing with. The economy is volatile, right? So we don't really know exactly what spending is going to look like in the next couple of years. Our security issues are growing. So don't take off the gas pedal, right? Now is a time to shift from crisis management to thinking through what the next 3 to 5 years are going to be, what markets you want to serve, what customers are important to you, what are they looking for from an experience, how do you become better at data? And when you mentioned automation, I think automation is really about augmenting people and making them more productive. It's not really, I warn against the idea that everything could be robotic and humanly without any human in the loop. How can machines process data so that someone in a medical field can make a better diagnostic? Someone in banking can offer me a better set of services that match my financial acumens and interests. So those are the kind of things that I think that we have to do. And for CEOs, I think it's today is a lot about what are you saying to your employees about your mission what are you working, why you should work at your company, what you're trying to achieve, what's your big goal mission. And if you don't have those things, they get trickled down into, well, let's pick up a piece of technology or a workflow that is in environment A and move it somewhere else in environment B. Maybe we're a little bit more efficient. Maybe we're a little bit smarter or more scalable, but we know we haven't changed the business model, right? We've just upgraded our process or technology, and that's what you really don't want to fall back into at this point.
No, that makes a lot of sense. There's a number of spots in again, I haven't had a chance to read the whole book. What I've read, there's a number of spots that talk about the importance of really, for lack of a better word, following through on things like sales and marketing, not to mention the importance of sales and marketing, right? I've seen, through my career, and these could just be anecdotal mistakes by one-off companies as opposed to a broader trend that occurs in a lot of companies. But I've seen the mistakes that you describe where, you try it for 2 months and then you say, oh, that the owner of the attempt says, well, it apparently isn't working with that marketing strategy, so let's try something else. Or that sales strategy isn't working, so let's try another way, or hire a different sales manager or whatever the case may be. But I've also seen, so I want to talk about that and the measures and metrics you suggest focusing on and establishing, so whether whether it's you've taken a path that might work, and two, you can actually measure why you should stay that route or go another way, but also whether you've seen this anecdotal data that I was talking about that seems like many companies, when they begin to struggle, whether it's economic oriented or like a broader economic downturn, or they themselves are struggling, cut back on what appears to me as the unwashed, the single most important aspect of your business at a time when there's struggles, which is you want to get more visibility and more likability and understanding of your product, which generally comes from some form of marketing.
Yeah.
And that's the area that gets cut.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Wow, there's a lot to unpack there. And I think the biggest story here is having patience in your programs. You're not going to put out an MVP, right, and always see instant hockey stick results the quarter after that. Even Bezos says things like, the success we had today is based on decisions we made a couple of years ago. Well, if Amazon's saying that, and I like to tell people, none of us are Amazon. So it's going to take a little bit of time to materialize, especially if we want to go to market and start getting some feedback earlier. I also think there's it's been popularized to pivot, right? Even, so one mistake is to pull the plug too early, or the other mistake is to send the troops left and then go right and then switch back left. And, because you think that, pivoting is the right answer to this. What you really want to be doing is, deciding what data you're collecting up front, right? What is the kind of information we're trying to learn based on what we're putting out to market today? Right. And we're going to put that out to market today, a month, 2 months, whatever the right cycle is. And then as we're going out, getting ready for the next iteration of what we're trying to improve on, we're going to start turning our ears open, talking to customers, capturing data, doing surveys, all the things that we're supposed to do to get a sense of what's going on. And it's really hard at that point because data is not going to be, do this and you're going to hit your hockey stick. It's going to give you conflicting information. You're going to start re-questioning what your segments are, what your go-to-market strategy looks like, how you should message things. And so, bring that team together and forming some consensus of, do I do a little bit more in this direction? Do I put more emphasis in another direction? Or maybe something has really happened where I want to have a conversation around a pivot. I think pivot's really there for when market conditions have changed so dramatically that my underlying assumptions that went into what I was investing in have changed. COVID is a classic example. You wouldn't have predicted it. Now it's here. Now we have to pivot to address that. I think what we're seeing in terms of inflation is an evolving pivot, right? We're not going to see the same levels of growth, you look at any category in any single industry, and the reality is consumers have tons of choice today. Businesses have tons of choice today, right? So if you cut back on the marketing, right, on the messaging, on the branding, on where you're differentiating, if you're cutting back at the top of the channel that says, here's why you're going to work from us, and a lot of things downstream fall apart from there. Yeah. Your sales team can't sell against it. You have maybe the wrong customers coming in with the wrong sets of expectations. Now you have support issues trying to retain them. Your team doesn't understand what your strategy is because you're really not marketing to it. They learn a lot about it from the marketing. So a lot of things fall back downstream, and maybe this is you're going to be a little bit more choosy or a little bit more efficient with what you're doing. But this is not a time to let off the gas pedal. It's about time when you're maybe slowing down a little bit from the fast gas pedal, but you're getting smarter about what you're choosing to invest in. Right.
That makes sense. So you sort of hinted at this in one of your earlier questions, but if you were to develop, as you talked about this in your book, if you're to develop a digital trailblazer, what do you think? I mean, besides the obvious, basic education of understanding what the importance of digital is and how to apply it to a business, et cetera. What are some of the foundational things you think are important in developing a digital trailblazer, for lack of a better description?
Yeah, I think the first thing I've been sharing this, I actually did a keynote on this just yesterday, so it's pretty fresh. Digital trailblazers can come from a lot of different aspects of the organization. They may be product managers, they may be DevOps on both the dev and ops side. I know some security folks who want to turn around the no, can't do it security mindset to how do we make security a differentiator, an enabler for our business. Security professionals can be digital trailblazers. Data scientists that look beyond the science and look at how do we deliver outcomes. How do we improve data governance as part of our science programs? They can be part of being trailblazers. So what you're really looking for are people, who really know their area of expertise very well. They're continuing to develop their skill sets in their area of expertise. They're extremely curious about how they fit in their ecosystem with their collaborators. So, DevOps folks understanding product, or data teams understanding DevOps, security understanding how applications are developed. So they're moving left and right from their core competencies. And then what they're really looking to do is to be exposed to new experiences. And what I mean by that is, put them in a situation where they have to facilitate a solution and brainstorming session. Right. Let somebody in security go do that. Let somebody in product be in charge of handling a war room or a bridge call on an operational issue. Let them experience something like that. Yeah. Right. And so now you're putting them outside of their comfort zone. They have to learn a new skill set, learn a new vernacular. And that's, in my opinion, how you're taking people who maybe have done and excelled at one area. They've launched a data science program, or they've launched applications, or they've scaled operations when moving from data centers to cloud. And you're giving them the ability to say, okay, I'm now versed in 2 or 3 or 4 different areas. I'm starting to understand the business a little bit more in terms of an end-to-end delivery model. And now I can start participating with stakeholders because I can have a conversation about what it takes to actually implement some of the ideas that we're trying to go after.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, we're even though we started a little bit late, we're already coming close to the end of our half hour, which it seems like it's only been 10 minutes. So even if we have to run a little bit over with this next question, I hope that's okay with you. But
I'm good.
I'm a big history buff relative in general, but also relative to IT, because I believe that many of the trends we see are trends that are repeated. just different names attached, whether it's a server strategy or virtualization strategy or a container strategy or going from mainframes to towers. It's just a different technology or different name, but the trends are repeated, right? And I also like to see how trends impact what people do, buying decisions, choices they make, et cetera. So I consider myself a keen industry observer. And considering how many organizations you work with and CIOs you talk to and CEOs you talk to, what are some of the things that you've found in the last couple of years that stand out from digital transformation, maybe, that are urgent relative to strategy, people, or technology trends? What would you pick that it really seems urgent to them?
Well, I think that I'm going to give you two examples and then tell you how they connect. Okay. There was a trend 10 years ago, let's call it 15 years ago. Everything needed to be in the data center, right? And that was pushing away from, we don't want servers underneath the desk. We don't want people outsourcing it to areas that we don't want to understand. Everything needs to be going through IT operations, dev, production, business continuity, DR. We need to have this structure to make sure that we can get through compliance, and then we got over the hump of public cloud as a place to be able to put workloads. And then, sort of the pendulum swung the other way. We want to be cloud native, cloud first. We started trying to take things that were, really operationalized for a data center running on big boxes and start saying, we're going to put that exact workload, we're going to lift and shift them into a cloud environment, and then realize, holy cow, what the developers and the team said would take 4 weeks is now taking 4 months. Okay, I'm still re-architecting my systems and it's costing more, right? Yeah. And so now we're back in the middle and saying and asking what I think is the right question, right? What belongs where, right? And I think part of the reason is, maybe, the Amazons and the Microsofts and the Googles pushed the envelope, built up services, made things easy to on-ramp. But I see a lot of the infrastructure companies have caught up, in some cases leapfrogged. And then there's certain workloads, if you have a highly variable workload that doesn't have to be, geographically close to a specific area, doesn't have high compliance, doesn't have low latency. Maybe that belongs in the cloud. But if you have something that's, the volatility isn't there, you have a steady stream of usage, you have something that needs to be close to, in proximity somewhere else to data that's being collected. I'm thinking of smart city and smart building type of technologies, hospitals that want to put more technology in the hospital, don't want the latency or the risk of some data not going back and forth in the cloud. You got to look at a more balanced architecture around this. The second example around, so that's at the infrastructure level. At the application level, the DevOps community felt that we needed to be able to tell developers that they can pick and choose the technologies that was most appropriate to solve a problem. And I sat there and I scratched my head and said, well, if I'm a startup and I'm telling the CTO, go pick technologies out with your team, that probably works. But if I have 1,000 people in IT, 100 different groups doing some sort of technologies, and I give, 50 of them the ability to create their own stack, I know where this leads to, right? I can't support them, right? I can't support the technologies that 50 different groups are building. Some of them won't be secure. Some of them will go legacy and tech debt faster. And so you take these extremes of lots of different choices. Yep. Right. That's really might be the one unique thing we have in this generation. We grew up in the generation of Microsoft or Unix, right? You're either a 3-tier group or a 2-tiered group. Right. You had a few kind of fundamental choices and then a lot of smaller choices after that. Now you have hundreds of choices, and that means picking one way doesn't work. Right. And picking 100 ways doesn't work. And so I think what the CIO really has to do is, what's the right set of standards to home in on, right? What's the right set of workloads? What are you projecting that you have to do from customer facing, from internal facing, from a data streaming perspective, from a geography perspective? And what's the right number of avenues to go invest into in terms of patterns?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I couldn't agree more. I started using the phrase about 5 years ago. I might have talked to you about this too, of best fit. And you and I both been around long enough to know that almost every IT solution we've ever developed or participated in has historically been a compromise.
Of course.
We can't spend that much money on the software. We can't spend that much money on the network costs in order to get everybody in the organization that's distributed the same level of performance and availability that the people at the corporate office have, or whatever the case may be. They're compromises we make. And today's world, as you so aptly described, on both sides of the equation, we have now the opportunity to make literally everything we want best fit.
Almost.
But, almost. Yeah. But that does come with its own burden. I mean, just even thinking back to, when I was doing IT and outside of the Windows environment, there were really 3 or 4 coding languages that people commonly used.
Yeah.
Now there's 4 that are the top number 1 coding languages, and there's 400 below that.
And there's 4,000 frameworks underneath that, and probably 40,000 tools in libraries that go underneath that.
Right, and you think about something like a Kubernetes or any kind of complex solution like that being introduced as free via GitHub download or something. It's free like a free puppy. Yeah, right.
Yeah, you got to feed the puppy and they get bigger. Right. I like that. And they need shots, right? And the company might be a barker or a biter, and you got to deal with that.
That's right. So there are a lot of tough choices, and I certainly think that Isaac Sacolick is doing the right things at very much the right time. Not that it's not always been a benefit, but you're doing the right things at the right time, in my opinion.
Thank you.
So hats off to you, and I'm looking forward to finishing your new book, and maybe I can convince you to get me a signed copy.
Oh, you're on the list already, so don't worry about it.
Awesome. But Isaac, 2 things, I guess. One is, any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience, can be almost anything, and then let everybody know, where and how they can keep up with you.
Yeah, I'm going to answer both questions in one. I love hearing from people. I mean, I don't just come up with my ideas for writing and speaking because I'm a genius at figuring out what people want. People ask me questions, and we have conversations like this, and I'm like, oh, more people want to know about X. So, reach out to me on Twitter. NYIke, NYIKE on Twitter is probably the best way. Come see what we're doing at starcio.com. STARCIO.com, and you'll see links to my books all over the place. You'll see our COE programs listed there, our Center of Excellence programs, our Agile programs. So lots of stuff there. But most importantly, reach out, ask me a question. I'm happy to have a conversation.
Awesome. I appreciate it very much. And folks, I recommend keeping up with Isaac. I think his work is fantastic, and I've always enjoyed our conversations on Twitter and in other formats. So
yes, Mark, and looking forward to doing that meetup in the near future.
Absolutely. Will happen. It will happen one way or the other. So with that, Isaac, again, thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate having you on.
Thank you.
Fun conversation. I'll look forward to doing it again in the future at some point. And for the audience, thank you very much for listening in. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. And if you have another recommendation that you'd like to make for the Edgevana podcast, please drop me a line at podcast@edgevana.com. Until next time. Thanks, Isaac.
Thanks, Mark.